Hi, everyone.
Hello. Ray Franz, in An Appealing Promise Unfulfilled, page 585 of In Search of Christian Freedom, he's been looking at whether unconditional love can exist in an organization where you're expected to change your beliefs on the turning of a dime. Mm-hmm. And he concludes that no, you cannot. Because the JW Creed, unlike the creeds of Christendom, is changing constantly.
Yeah.
And although they're averse to the word creed, in effect they have one, and it's whatever they believe at the present. Mm-hmm. So Ray takes up the argument here. How solid a basis for friendship is this? As noted, many of the doctrinal beliefs have been extremely fluid, some changing with almost kaleidoscopic variety and frequency. This became sufficiently evident, even to the leadership, that they often use the expression present truth. Examples of doctrinal change are remarkably numerous and can only bring to mind and confirm the rightness of the principle set out in Jesus' statements about the disappointing results of building on sand, which shifts and lacks stability, and about the vain emptiness of worship that is built around human regulations, as also the Apostle Paul's reference to the undesirableness of being as children at the mercy of every chance wind of teaching and of the jockeying of men, as they tack this way and that in advancing their views. And the scriptures he's referring to are the last verses of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7, and also Ephesians 4, verse 14 in the Phillips translation.
Only the fool refuses to change. The sensible person recognizes his own limitations and imperfections. True wisdom has its inseparable companions both modesty and humility. But if it is foolish to refuse to change, it is equally foolish to base one's trust, one's convictions, on that which is unstable, to commit oneself to a belief system which is built upon the fluctuating, shifting views of imperfect men. The lamentable factor in the history of the witness organization is not primarily the instability of its teachings, but its insistence, particularly from the 1920s forward, that all must accept whatever teachings happen to be current, as though they were solid, stable truth. To accept them means being in the truth. To reject any of them places one outside the truth. Friendship conditioned on such acceptance requires one to shift whenever the teachings shift. Otherwise, the conditional friendship is endangered.
The real test of any friendship is how it responds to difficulties. In an article entitled True Friends, Why So Hard to Find, the Watchtower comments, quote, "Some people are superficial, concerned only with the surface aspects of life. Others are not willing to make the sacrifices necessary for friendship. Don't get involved is the advice one hears so often these days. As one elderly woman observed, they love, but at a distance. Even in cultures where profuse hugging and kissing are common courtesies, there may be a lack of real support when dire need strikes." And that's the end of the quote. And then Ray says, under the subheading, Shallow Friendships, the article goes on to say, and we're back to the same article, many people nevertheless claim that they do have friends, but how much depth is there to such relationships? Often a person takes an interest in someone because of what that one has to offer, not because of what he is. Such friendships are therefore likely to be short-lived, for as soon as the friend ceases to be useful, he or she is promptly discarded. And both those quotes were from the Watchtower, May 15, 1985, pages 3 and 4.
I believe that any witness who takes time to weigh matters will realize how greatly friendship among witnesses, ultimately, and in the final analysis, is predicated on one's being in favor with the organization and what he has to offer in such an organizational context, not on what he is as a person, or the qualities he has, or the values he upholds. The person's qualities or values have merit only as they conform to and advance the organizational interests. That kind of friendship is very much like one that stems primarily from one's holding membership in good standing within a club, lodge, union, or similar group.
Well, Ray has a footnote about this expression, present truth, that he alluded to in the first paragraph of what we just read.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, see Crisis of Conscience, page 217. So if you want more about that and its historic application within the Watchtower, Crisis of Conscience, page 217. And then he goes on, the expression appears as recently as 1988 in the book Revelation, its grand climax at hand, on page 8, which speaks of the, quote, need to keep up to date with present truth, unquote. Doing this despite the fact that from its early use in Watchtower publications, the phrase is one adopted from the King James or Authorized version rendering of 2 Peter 1 verse 12, a rendering that is nowhere followed by any modern translation, including the Society's own New World Translation. The thought is not of present in the sense of being current, a temporal sense, but in the sense of presence of location, hence of truth that had already been received and was with or in those to whom Peter wrote. The New English Bible, for example, reads, quote, I will not hesitate to remind you of this again and again, although you know it and are well grounded in the truth that has already reached you, end of quote. The Watchtower writer, in employing this out-of-date expression, is himself failing to follow his own urging to keep up to date. So it is true that that expression has dropped out of the vocabulary of the modern generation of witnesses, but the thought is not out of their thought patterns, i.e. the idea that God reveals new truth to the current situation and the current generation.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to link to 2 videos, one about conditional love, and that is Yahweh's everlasting love, mm-hmm. versus conditional contract, which is essentially what you have in an organization like the Watchtower. Mm-hmm. And that's based on Jeremiah chapter 31. It made a big difference, especially to Vivian when we left. And then the second video we're linking is Nelson Barber and Charles Taze Russell, the concept of present truth, which we recently enumerated in our videos on their book, 3 Worlds. We enumerated this concept of present truth among the gotcha doctrines, i.e. if you really believe that God is revealing new truth, then you have to find the person who is getting the revelation. Mm-hmm. In effect, it becomes new revelation beyond and above the Bible.
And I would say some are kind of falling into the same pattern, just with new voice that they're listening to, their own sometimes.
Yeah.
And only their own.
Next time, shelved saints and fair weather friends.